I am Kirsten Gjesdal. I am the executive director of Downtown Brookings, and I also am kind of the in-office person that manages the Brookings Farmers Market. So today we're going to go over some of how we kind of have structured the organization, some funding and growth opportunities that we have used here in Brookings that you might be able to use for your own farmers market. And I've kind of put pictures throughout the entire thing because I think presentations can get kind of boring when it's just text. So try to put some nice little pictures of our market throughout to kind of show you what we do in our community. All right. So about us, the Brookings Farmers Market was established and kind of started operating, to the best of my knowledge, in about 1997. I was 6 years old at that point, so I wasn't there when it was established. So some of the kind of background information is just from what I've been able to dig up or have heard from vendors who have been there for a long time. But as a whole, the Brookings Farmers Market is a program of the 501c3 nonprofit of Downtown Brookings, and it was established to provide a community gathering space where local farmers and entrepreneurs can sell directly to the consumer. So what that means, that kind of sentence, looking at that, when the Brookings Farmers Market moved under the Downtown Brookings organization, all we added to their kind of mission statement that's here was that the part that's within the commas, a program of the 501c3 nonprofit Downtown Brookings. So when the organization moved under kind of that larger parent organization, that's the only thing that we changed about their mission, was just a clarification that it is part of another organization. Something else that this sentence kind of shows off is that the local farmers and entrepreneurs sell directly to the consumer. So we are a growers and makers market only. We don't allow like reselling of items purchased at wholesale, kind of the multi-level marketing. Only people who are creating or growing or baking the products that are being sold are allowed to be there. So our goals are to improve opportunities for all in our community by promoting local economic development, as well as social and community building through educational and family-friendly activities. So we host vendors who sell items, but we also host a number of community partners and other nonprofits throughout the year who offer family activities, educational items. We put out yard games. We have free family yoga about once a month and a couple other things like that, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. But really thinking about the farmers market as more than just a space for people to sell items. It is also a community gathering space and an important area to really help your community as a whole thrive. So some of the more kind of specific details about the market: we're open every Saturday, 9 to noon, May through October. We also added on a winter market this last year. That was about twice a month, November through April. We had that on one Thursday and one Saturday a month, and found that Saturdays were, much more successful than the Thursdays. So looking ahead at this next year, we'll probably still try to offer those 2 markets a month, but do them just on Saturdays. So that was a new thing we added last year. We average about 30 vendors per weekend, with a max of about 40. We have space for up to 48 vendors, but that would be very intense. So we maxed out at about 40. So far this year, we've received 95 applications to become a vendor at the farmers market, and we get probably 1 or 2 a week at this point. We have done a couple counts of guests at the farmers market. We see about 750 to 800 visitors a week. We haven't done a count yet this year, but I would say our foot traffic has increased. So I'm intrigued to figure out what that number is. And we have this year gotten about $9,000 in corporate sponsorships for the farmers market specifically. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit as well. Brookings as a whole is a community. It's about 25,000 people, but about half of them are SDSU students. So when the market is actually functioning throughout the summer, our kind of population size is much smaller. So here's a picture of a farmer's market. We have it between our, that middle picture there, the library and the courthouse. So the library is on the left side, as well as our arts council, and then our courthouse is on the right side. And there's a really lovely lawn on the kind of right side of that picture there that we can do yard games and have kind of kids run free, essentially. Okay, so the history of the market. We were established, to the best of my knowledge, in 1997. And then looking back through kind of how it's grown and changed throughout the years, I do know that they received a farmers market promotion grant in 2007, and that purchased the trailer that we still use today, a number of supplies, a grill, a grain mill, things like that, that some of those we don't use and ended up selling on a rummage sale a few years ago. But I think that that program was very essential for getting the market kind of running and more established. At that point, that grant was given to the Downtown Brookings organization. So it was called the Downtown Brookings Farmers Market. And then the farmers market pulled out onto its own organization in 2009 and was incorporated with the state of South Dakota. And then in 2010, got its 501c3 tax exempt status. And right about that time is when I started attending the market, moved here up to Brookings for SCSU. And so about then is when I started as a consumer attending the market. In 2016, I joined the board of the farmers market and really could see that there were some good opportunities for the market to be looking at. So we looked at potential new locations and ended up moving the market to where it is now. It used to be located in the parking lot by kind of our Goodwill and movie theater. So it was a big kind of paved blacktop parking lot with a big tent over it. And it was offered 2 days a week, one weekday in the afternoon, and then on Saturdays. But what we noticed is that vendors were often picking one day or the other, as well as customers. And so the vendors weren't happy with the number of customer count throughout the days. And then the customers weren't happy with the vendor counts because they were, switching between whether they're there one day a week or 2 days a week. And so with moving the market to the location it's at now, squish that down to just Saturdays to really compress the number of customers and the number of vendors all into one day. So it was worthwhile for both the vendors and the customers to attend the market. We received a Wellmark grant for putting in that new location electricity, some 4 benches and some bike racks, some amenities that were needed at that new location to really make a good spot for the market to be. And we started receiving about $4,000 a year through our city funding. And so that's called Triple B funds is where that money came out of. It stands for bed, booze, and board. So most of your communities probably also have that tax and have that ability to disperse that. In Brookings, I'm not sure if it's the same for the entire state or if it's just Brookings, but the requirement for those funds is that it's spent on kind of economic development. What that actually means is very much open to interpretation, but we did start applying for that as the market in 2016, specifically to help with hiring a market manager for the market. That money was continued to be received with a yearly application until 2020. And I was off the board in 2018, so it ended in about 2020. I'm not sure why, but I really think it was just the process and the paperwork was just kind of lost and didn't get it in on time, didn't know that it was supposed to kind of be submitted to the city in order to continue getting that funding. And then also in 2020, looking back at kind of some paperwork, this state of South Dakota administratively dissolved the organization in 2020 because they hadn't been submitting their kind of yearly updates. And the federal nonprofit status was revoked in May 2024 because that was 3 years of delinquency of not filling out the required paperwork to maintain your 501c3 nonprofit status. So working in the downtown Brookings office and getting kind of that established and seen from the outside that there were some issues that were happening within the farmers market, a transfer of knowledge, of paperwork, of data, of processes. I saw that there was a big opportunity of partnering with the farmers market to help them run that event and that organization more efficiently, making sure that things didn't continue to fall through the cracks, that there was someone consistently there to be able to keep those processes like getting city funding up and going. So brought that to the farmers market board in 2023 to see if that was in partnership they were interested in participating in. The board voted to do a test run of it for the year of 2023. That went over really well. And so in 2024, they had voted to officially dissolve the Brookings Farmers Market nonprofit and organization and move that under Downtown Brookings. But conveniently, that nonprofit status was revoked at that point. So it took very little kind of paperwork and footwork to make that happen, because at that point, the organization technically, legally didn't exist anymore. And then just on the side note, so as I mentioned, I was on the board from 2016 to 2018. If any of you are familiar with Brookings, I own the Carrot Seed Kitchen Company. So it's a kind of kitchenware, gourmet food store in downtown Brookings. And so I've been sponsoring the farmers market from 2016 through now, whether that be previously it was paying the yearly and maintaining the website, and now it's kind of more in an actual sponsorship capacity, and have overseen the program through downtown Brookings from 2023 until now. Here's some more pictures. On the right side there, you can kind of see that lawn that I had referenced, that we have free family yoga once a month. A couple of our vendors kind of featured there. All right, so I want to go over looking at what the organization, how it functioned, and some pros and cons of being a standalone entity versus being kind of partnered with another organization. Having been a part of the farmers market while it was a standalone entity, as well as when it was under this partner organization of Downtown Brookings, I've kind of seen the benefits and kind of the fallbacks of both scenarios. So we're going to talk about that. So we're going to start with being a standalone entity. So when the Brookings Farmers Market kind of just existed as its own 501c3 nonprofit, it had a 6-person board that was built with 3 vendors and 3 at-large community members. That board was tended to be 2-year terms, and so there would always be at least 3 people that had at least a year of experience running the farmers market and being on that board. That was the intention. That often was not how it worked out. There was a lot of, there'd be a vendor who had been on the board for like 10 years, and then the at-large community members would switch out every single year. So that's how it was supposed to function, then how it actually functioned. And then there was a seasonal farmers market manager that was hired in the spring and then was done about a week after the market ended in the fall. That person was the only kind of paid employee of the market. And so they would do the communication throughout the week, run the social media, do the on-site setup and cleanup, vendor communications, a lot of the things that go along with that. That market manager pretty much only had financing to be able to pay for that market manager when the market was operating and collecting dues. And so sometimes that market manager would start like just a week or 2 before the market actually started for the year. And so a number of really important tasks relied solely on those kind of volunteer board members. And the organization had bylaws, had to have its own insurance coverage, annual reporting needs for both the state and federally for that nonprofit status, as well as paying their own employment tax. Submitting all of that information was still a requirement for that standalone organization to be doing. And it was funded primarily from kind of where most of the funds came from to the least through vendor fees. The farmers market, it was $20 every day that you were there for the season, and maxed out at $200 for the year. And it's open 26 Saturdays of the year. And so it's kind of like you get half the year free if you reach that point of being there. And also had the Triple B tax funding sometimes. So the Triple B funds that we got again, had primarily put that application in to help pay for that kind of operating seasonal market manager. And so when that funding was there, we were able to offer, I feel like, that market manager a competitive rate, just an hourly rate, to make that position really responsible for the success of the market and really care about doing great social media and marketing and partnering with other people. When that funding wasn't there, it took up all of the vendor fees in order to have someone hired. And so weren't able to do nearly as much marketing and investment into new supplies and improvements to the space. The market did ask for sponsorships, but that wasn't a very kind of big part of it. Usually there would be 2 probably sponsors a year, my business being one, and then usually the chiropractor that's located right next to the space was one too, because they'd let us use their electrical power for free. and then specific project grants. And so those are not for general operating funds. Those are just for things like putting in those bike racks and benches. So some considerations to keep in mind if you are a standalone entity or are kind of interested in becoming like an actual incorporated organization, or looking at being a 501c3 nonprofit, is you need a lot more volunteer and vendor involvement in order to make that organization run, which that alone has its pros and cons. Definitely, I would say a pro is that the vendors have a much better understanding of why the market maybe runs the way that it does, why it's in the location it is, why it has the hours it is, because they're very much involved in the decision making of everything that happens within the market. So full control over the direction, staffing, funding, locations, and so the vendors just automatically know a lot more because they're required to put their own volunteer time into kind of making that happen. I would say definitely one of the cons of it is that if you are having people just kind of cycle through that role, you are losing a lot of the kind of transfer of knowledge and the processes from one year to next. Having one market manager for a season not be the best market manager means you lose all the knowledge and the transfer and the processes for the 10 years prior, just by having one person who just isn't as passionate about the project. And so you can definitely have a volunteer that really is that person to kind of keep that knowledge. But frankly, I feel like that's kind of a lot to put on someone. And so make sure that you are appreciating whoever that volunteer is, that make sure that the wheel keeps spinning in the background. Farmers markets have a lot to do throughout, even when the season isn't taking place. There's a lot of things that still have to happen behind the scenes. As a standalone entity, you can really keep your mission as your market at the core of your programming. All you're doing is making sure that your mission as the market is being upheld and taking place. You don't really have to factor in any other organization's mission, which we'll talk about a little bit once we're talking about being under this partner organization. And I also think you can be much more flexible, agile, and creative about how you run your market, what events you do, what promotions you do. But you're also responsible for everything. So if something goes wrong, if there's an unexpected expense, like it is fully on your organization to figure out how to make that happen. You don't have really anyone to call on who might be able to kind of help pick up some of the slack or help pay for some of those unexpected expenses. So now I'll talk a little bit about being a subsidy of another organization. So that is now how the Brookings Farmers Market operates, as a subsidy of the Downtown Brookings organization, which kind of runs the programming and projects within our downtown Brookings neighborhood. And the Farmers Market is physically located kind of right on the edge of our downtown Brookings area. So the Downtown Brookings organization also has a 6-person board. They are all community members, downtown business owners. We have a city staff member on that board. We have one full-time staff member, which is me. We have 2 seasonal, what we now call market coordinators instead of market managers. So the market coordinators are the people who are physically at the farmers market every Saturday to set up, to tear down, to collect vendor dues, and to sit at the farmers market booth to help answer questions. And we have 2 of them because they switch off every weekend. So every other Saturday they're working. That was one of I think the difficult parts of just having that one market manager is they had to work every single Saturday throughout the entire summer. They didn't get a day off. And if they did, it was making sure that you have multiple vendors who are willing to show up early or bring extra people in order to kind of pull off the market that day. We also have one intern who's sitting right over here. You can't see her, but here she'll come wave. So this is Madeline. She's our intern. And then for the farmers market specifically, we have a 5-person vendor review committee. So that's 4 vendors and then me that review all of the applications that come in. And so that's kind of the one official farmers market sort of committee, if you will, that previously, I feel like that was kind of one of the main functions of the board of the farmers market, was to review those vendor applications. And now that's what that 5-person vendor review committee does, is as kind of the go-to if we have big questions and to review all of those applications. The Downtown Brookings organization has bylaws, has insurance covered, has annual reporting needs, has employment tax. So moving under that other organization doesn't eliminate any of that stuff. It just kind of moves the burden onto that parent organization and not necessarily onto that smaller farmers market function. And our organization is funded primarily about 70% by those triple B tax funds. There's always the chance that that can be pulled or reduced, but I think we're providing enough benefit to the city that they won't just pull that funding from us at some point. But we put in that application every year and have the farmers market listed and kind of a great narrative about why that market is important for our organization and for our community as a whole. We also, so next in line is sponsorships. I'm working with kind of corporate sponsors on all of our different festivals and events and things that take place in our downtown, as well as the farmers market. Specific project grants to make some of those big things happen. Those are not ones, again, for operating expenses, as is for one-time big projects. And then vendor fees do add up quite a bit. In the grand scheme of thing, it's probably like, I don't know, I'm doing math quick, probably less than 5% of our total kind of finances for the year as the organization. But I mean, 5% is still, I think, quite a lot. And it really helps make the function of coordinating the farmers market pay off. So considerations for being on subsidy of another organization, you need a lot less volunteer and vendor involvement. And so it's less coordinating of different people and finding people to fill those roles. However, that also means there's less understanding of decisions where we might have to move the layout a little bit compared to normal. And vendors might be kind of frustrated. Well, why did that happen? Well, it's because they're not the ones kind of leading that decision making anymore. It's us in the office that's kind of thinking through those things. So, so that's one thing to keep in mind. There's a lot less control over the direction, staffing, funding, and locations because the farmers market is now used as a program to further the parent organization's mission. So downtown Brookings, it's a very short mission, but for whatever reason, I just cannot remember it. So I'll read you. Our mission is, we're dedicated to the growth and prosperity of our vibrant downtown neighborhood. So that's what the official mission of downtown Brookings is. And so the original mission of the farmers market aligns really well with that. And so it's kind of used as a way to further our mission as a downtown Brookings organization. Kind of what that means for the farmers market, though, is that because we are a downtown organization, if the farmers market ever wanted to move, it would not be able to move out of downtown, because in order for us to be the ones running it, it needs to be within downtown for it to fit our mission. There's a lot more just being in a bigger organization, a lot more processes, paperwork, data tracking, kind of red tape where like I really have to make sure what we're doing follows, and partially because so much of our funding comes from the city, making sure that it follows the city processes and we have all the T's crossed and I's dotted, which I mean is great on one hand that everything is kind of following the rules, but on the other hand, you can't just like do something and then say, oh, sorry, we didn't know. We're being a kind of just a smaller farmers market organization. I feel like we just had a lot more kind of wiggle room where now I really have to make sure that we are following exactly what kind of the rules are. But the farmers market as a program has a lot less responsibilities. They're not necessarily the ones who have to do the processes, the paperwork, the data tracking. It's whoever the staff is on that parent organization. And then I think one of the big benefits is the knowledge and processes can remain the same one year to the next, that there is someone in the office working on the farmers market 365 days of the year. You're not kind of transferring that knowledge from one board to the next. We have it all tracked in an Excel sheet. We have the processes written down. We have the how-tos. And we also have, so then a full-time staff member, an intern, and 2 seasonal market coordinators that all have a firm understanding of how the market runs and are all paid to do that work. And so there's a number of people that if someone, were to fall sick or something, there's a number of people who know how that process works that can help pick up the slack and make the organization keep going. So here's some more pictures of our vendors. You can see on the left side there, that courthouse that's behind. I think it just is such a beautiful spot for the market. It's a little tucked in. And so I think that's the one downfall, is that it's not in a highly visible area. But on the same flip side, I think it's kind of nice because um, you can feel safe letting your kid kind of run around. Previously, when it was in a parking lot, like no way would you ever kind of just let your kid like free roam that area. But now it's very much a space where families feel safe in. Okay, so some details on how to establish kind of either one of those opportunities. So establishing as your own nonprofit. So some tips. I didn't establish the Brookings Farmers Market original nonprofit, but I did establish the Downtown Brookings nonprofit. And so I have been through this process just once before. I would highly recommend working with a small business development center. There's a couple offices throughout the state, but they offer free confidential business planning assistance. The farmers market, it is a business, and it should be treated as a business, making sure that, financially, you have your ducks in a row. Legally, you have insurance coverage, that you are dealing with taxes and employment laws and everything. So treat it as a business because it is. And the Small Business Development Center can offer a lot of coaching services for free. Candid.org has a really great resource on how to establish a 501c3 nonprofit. So making sure that you have your bylaws written, a mission, a vision, how to create a board, how to train them, legal needs. I literally read a book that was like how to create a nonprofit for dummies, like those yellow books. So read that in the process. I would say Candid is, since it's a website, it's kept up to date a little more than a print publication, like how to establish a nonprofit for dummies. And I would involve as much vendor and volunteer feedback as possible. When I had approached the farmers market, at that time it was the market manager, and was like, hey, I see that there are some, oh, let me go back up. So establishing your own nonprofit, because it requires so much volunteer time from your vendors in order to be on the board and keep it running, make sure that you are really involving them in that process, that it is an organization that the mission and vision fits the market, and you only know if it fits if you're working with those vendors that are there. And so very important to keep them involved in that process. And then establish an SOP, so standard operating procedures. Make a physical binder, make a Google Drive, something like that, that has your rules, your bylaws, a copy of who you work with for insurance, a copy of applications if you do apply for city funding. Make sure that is all kept and tracked somewhere that is easily accessible. So if you ever have someone kind of leave the board, an employee that's no longer able to work, that you know how to keep the market functioning. In the process of looking into the organization kind of being the nonprofit being dissolved at the federal level, I found that they had been sending a lot of communication to be like, hey, you're about to be dissolved, but it was going to an apartment complex that a farmers market coordinator manager from 3 years ago lived in and doesn't even live in the state anymore. And so making sure that there's like a PO box that mail is consistently being sent to, or working with, even if you could use your city's address or something like that to have it sent to a city office or a chamber office or something like that to just help keep that going. So if you're looking at joining a partner, make sure that you look for an organization with a very complementary mission and vision, because again, the farmers market then will be acting as a way to further that mission and vision. And so if you approach like a local grocery store, they're probably not necessarily interested, because hosting a farmers market won't further their mission because it's a direct competitor. But something like a chamber of commerce, a visitors bureau, an economic development group, that is all something that could possibly fit well with their mission and vision. And really look at staff capacity. I think that's kind of the biggest holdup, is that it does take a lot of work. I probably put, it depends on the time of the year. In the spring, probably up to like 10 hours a week. And then throughout the summer, anywhere like 3 to 5-ish hours a week on coordinating the market throughout the week on the back end. And then we have our market coordinators on site on those Saturdays. So it does take time. So make sure that they have the staffing capacity for that. Really explain the benefits, including the financial benefits of those increased sponsorships, of the vendor dues that you fees for having a booth there, that it does make financial sense and that they can pay if they do need additional staffing, that the money that comes in from the market can pay for that additional staffing, that it's not a financial burden. That there's a lot of marketing benefit that comes along with that. If something like your chamber, for example, is maybe having trouble showing their getting their name out there and really getting people to recognize the work that they do. A farmer's market's a great way to advertise a larger organization's mission. And then it really spreads goodwill. The farmer's market, nobody hates a farmer's market. Generally, nobody hates a farmer's market. And so being able to kind of attach your name to the joy that comes from a farmer's market, I think is lovely. It's a definite benefit. And then consider a trial run. We had a trial run for a year to make sure that it worked well. I think a year trial run worked well for us because I was so involved in the farmers market and understood how it functioned prior to it moving under our office. If it's like a brand new kind of management for some sort of larger organization, it'll be a little bit messier. There'll be some more things that they have to kind of work out. I think managing a farmer's market is just as much managing processes as it is managing personalities. And so I knew the personalities of many of the vendors ahead of time. So I kind of knew who wants to be where, who doesn't want to be located next to this person, who probably is going to say they're going to come, but won't actually show up. So I had that background. So it was a little easier to kind of step into that role. So it's not going to be perfect right away, and that's okay. So here's some more pictures, some fun stuff. Okay, so now specifically on funding. So if you're looking at municipal funding, so that's like those 3B funds, bed, booze, and board. I have some just kind of tips and how-tos and some ideas on how to do that. So if you've never seen someone from your city council, your mayor, someone from your city offices at your farmers market, invite them to come. Be intentional about asking them to be there. I think there's a much better understanding of the importance of a farmers market when they've actually, like seen it. And so if you haven't seen them there, invite them there. That's kind of step one, is to get them to think about the farmers market and get them to kind of incorporate that into their weekly kind of schedule. Inquire about the budget timeline because it can be way earlier than you think it is. So funding for 2026, that application was due in May of 2025. So I've already put my application in for funding for next year for our organization, which I think is why the farmers market stopped being funding, is because you have to think so far in advance. So your market coordinator for one summer is trying to do the work to set up whoever the market coordinator for next year is going to have to kind of deal with the outcome of whether that is funded or not. So make sure to ask about that timeline and keep that in mind. Prepare data now, like foot traffic. So we've had volunteers come and just kind of sit at the different entrances and just keep a clicker to keep track of how many people show up. I think that is very important. So foot traffic, how many businesses you've served, that's been an excellent metric to share with our city, is that throughout this process we've hosted 72 different small businesses for a total of 1,430 different booth spaces throughout the year. That's something that they really like seeing. And then if your vendors are willing to share dollars sold or like sales tax collected. Sometimes vendors aren't willing to share that information, but if they are, that can be helpful as well. So shoot high if you're asking for funds. Asking for an increase is very, very hard, but it's very easy to get cut. And so might as well ask for 5,000 and get 4,000, ask for 2,000 and get 1,800. So aim high. And really relate the market. What you're trying to do is show the benefit to your city, the benefit of having a farmer's market, how that affects the community as a whole, and how it affects the city's finances. And so relate that to entrepreneurship and small business support, that you're really acting as an incubator for businesses that bring money to the community, who have the ability to grow larger, to have their products in physical retail stores at some point, who can maybe distribute their goods to restaurants. So really showcasing that provides entrepreneurship and small business support, that it is a tourism destination. So that is bringing in money from outside of our community to community members. When I travel, I always look for where the farmers market's at, and that becomes, I mean, I always go to a farmers market when I'm traveling. And so showing that as a tourism destination. This one's a little woo-woo, but it's like, it's it's what I love is the concept of building community belonging. If you are trying to attract new people to come to your community and live there, if you're doing workforce attraction, workforce retention, a farmer's market is an excellent way to build community belonging. It gets people to your market to learn about their neighbors, to have a space for their kids to play, to buy good food, and it really gets them connected and start to build roots into your community so they stay there longer, or stay there forever. And so I think really showing that as a benefit, and the tax dollars generated, I would say with both the community belonging and the tax dollars generated, so tax dollars that are collected and submitted from your vendors, really make sure that you actually have the programming and the funds to then like back that up. Saying that you are generating tax dollars, but maybe you're not sure if your vendors are actually collecting and submitting sales tax, like make sure that that's something they're actually doing. Or saying that you build community belonging, but you never actually like have an event, have an activity for kids or put out chalk for kids to play with or something like that. Make sure that you actually are doing what you say you're doing. Um, Sponsorships, another way to get some funding. So look at financial institutions, health organizations, and real estate people. So that might be rental, like apartment facilities, property management facilities, or realtors. They really want people to move to your community and buy a house from them, and having a community worth living in is the way to do that. And a farmer's market, again, it builds community belonging and really makes your space a vibrant community. Health organizations, you can relate having fresh, local, healthy food available to citizens. And I think that's a great way to kind of connect your missions together. And financial institutions are all about supporting entrepreneurs and small businesses. And so making a connection that way of how your market does that work, uh, really make sure that you align well with that business. Make sure that if you are asking them for a sponsorship, you are giving them like real benefits. So we have a welcome sign on 3 different sides of our market that lists who our yearly sponsors are. And so 26 Saturdays throughout the summer, plus the, 12 other days in the winter, their logo is right in the face of everybody walking into our market. We include them on our marketing, so on our radio ads, on our newspaper ads, on our posters, their logo is listed there. We shout them out on social media. And for our bigger sponsors, we are that makers and growers market, so people can't just like put up a booth to advertise their personal business. We give them a booth space, so anywhere between like 1 to 3 times a year, they can put up a booth to kind of just use as marketing. And make sure if you're approaching businesses that you align well with them, you do it in person and don't just send a generic letter. A generic letter just doesn't, it's not going to appeal to their heartstrings. It's not really going to show off the benefit. I think writing a letter is helpful, but bring it along with to a coffee meeting with your banker to talk about it further. And so they have something to take away and kind of bring to their office to discuss. So more notes on funding. Grants, if you are looking at grants, don't plan on them to help you with general operating funds. They're generally best for using for projects. And so if you are looking at getting like a storage space, doing some facility improvements, if your farmer's market wants its own booth space and supplies, that's a great way to look at grants. Smaller grants under $5,000 are easier to apply for, but for farmers markets, I mean, a $5,000 is a huge impact on kind of the operating funds for, or the general funds for a farmer's market, and really look at trying to find grants that have a big impact on the environment and the vibe of the market space. Like you want that to be a space that people enjoy spending time in and come back to every single week. And so investing in the space and making it enjoyable space to be is important. If you aren't a nonprofit, a lot of the grants do require you to be a nonprofit, but you can partner, even if you aren't an organization like a program under them, you can partner with a nonprofit organization to assist you in applying and executing that grant. So maybe you work with the United Way to invest in that space because that aligns well with their mission and their vision, and they can help you kind of be an application partner for that. Other funding opportunities, look at your vendor fees. We increased this year to $25 per day, $250 total for the season. The rates hadn't increased since at least, I think it was like 2005. It's been $20. And I mean, I don't know, 20 years, the cost of things have changed. So the vendors didn't balk at that idea this year. We sell locally made mugs and some tote bags that have our farmers market kind of logo on it. And when we first made them, the tote bags sold like hotcakes and we barely sold any mugs. And now it's the opposite, as we're selling a ton of mugs and barely any bags. So you kind of have to stay up on the trends. Put out a donation jar. We probably get like $20 a year in our donation jar. So it's not that much. But what it does do is it helps show your customers there that 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 the funds that they give your organization are put to good work, that the organization, farmers markets don't just happen, that it requires community support in order to keep that going. And so it may be just more of like a visual. And then in-kind donations, don't forget those. And so if you have a local radio station, see if they would do in-kind support of offering you to like sponsor the weather announcement every week on the radio, but it not costing you. So instead of having pay for it, they sponsor you by giving you something kind of free or a free activity. Our nonprofit booths that we sponsor, we have nonprofits come to the market. They have to apply like a regular vendor, but our requirement is you don't have to pay to be there, but you do have to offer a kid-friendly activity. And so they get marketing out of it, we get activities out of it, and it works out pretty well. A couple more picks. The Salvation Army comes to our market a few times a month, and the director there has a hobby farm, and so she brings some of her fun little animals, which is a good example of partnering with another nonprofit organization. Okay, and there was a request to talk a little bit about recruitment and retention of vendors. So this is one of my last little slides with some tips on there. So as I mentioned, we had 90 some applications this year and continue to get more. So, and that has increased significantly. I would say when I first joined the market board, we probably maxed out at about 20 vendors a weekend, and now we're maxing out at it closer to that 30, 35-ish. And so recruitment, have an official application form that people fill out that's easy to find. So that means it's posted online, and you potentially also have physical copies available that people can pick up somewhere. We use a Google form for our application, and that works really well for us. But you can't get people to apply to your market if you have no way for them to actually apply to your market. So make sure that that's available and posted. We hang posters in about mid-March. No, that's maybe mid-February in area businesses and post on social media that we're now accepting applications for the farmers market. We accept applications throughout the entire year, but your better shot of getting into the market is applying right away, because we'll review the first 60 applications at the same time, and then it's rolling from there. So we might not have space. So being able to get as many people to apply before that first review is helpful. Email that information to all past vendors and potential new vendors. And so anyone who's ever inquired about being at the farmers market, any vendors who you couldn't accept the year prior, make sure that they have all that information and it's sent out. Be mindful to avoid too much overlap, but know that some competition is good. So we are like capped out on our baked good vendors. We're capped out on artisans. But sometimes I can tell when an application comes in that this looks like a really good fit. And I think increasing competition is better because it makes everybody better. Competition kind of helps vendors maybe take their business more seriously, work on making their booth look a little bit better, work on making their products a little bit better. And so competition is good, but make sure you're not putting in too much competition, because you have to make sure it's worth your vendor's time to be there. New vendors need help with tips on how to set up their booth, on how to work with health code, on how to register a business, on taxes. So even if you don't know that information, have some resources available to send them to, such as that Small Business Development Center that I had mentioned earlier. When they apply on our application, we have a checkbox that asks them, do you need assistance with sales tax? Do you need assistance with the health department? And that helps us kind of get them set on the right path. And so we're not surprised when they show up that day and have no idea what they're doing. And invest again in that experience to really make your market the place to be. If you are in an area that's maybe just like yucky. I don't know, like if you're, so for example, when we were in our parking lot, like it was a hot black top. It was not enjoyable. There was no green space. It was just like hot and loud, and it was not any place that you would ever linger. What you want to do is get people to linger at your market to really build those connections, make it part of their weekly routine. And so next, vendor retention. We give seniority to people who have been vendors at the market in the past, but not at the expense of better partnerships. So, for example, this year, what we did is we have a number of artisans who come to the market and have been there for a while, but we have a separate kind of every month they put in their availability for the month, and we give out spaces based on what we have available. Our priority is food. And so we don't want to have a bunch of artisans come and then mean that we have less food vendors. And so making sure that we're take care of the people who have been there for a while, but not at the expense of having the food products that people expect when they come to the market. We do vendor surveys at the end of the year, and we track that over time, kind of how their happiness and how much they're selling kind of flows year to year. We host a start the year and end of the year meeting. That's like all vendors are invited to. And sometimes, depending on the year, there might be one or two more throughout the season if needed. Every single Friday, I send a weekly email with the layout on it, with updates, with the weather forecast for that Saturday, as well as opportunities. So I copy and paste the listing of upcoming events and trainings and webinars and things that was sent out. And that helps our vendors just become better vendors and better prepared for the weekend. And then systemize your market so it runs professionally and efficiently. I think that's the best way to retain your vendors, is to make sure that they have a good time there and that they're taken care of, and the process of being there isn't confusing and isn't difficult. So there's only a few of us on here, but if you have any questions, I would love to take them.
You talk a little bit more about the process of involving the board and the vendors in the tasks like writing grants or applying to be a nonprofit. Does that look like just communicating directly with individual vendors to get their feedback, or were you hosting meetings, or were you asking them at the market? What did that kind of look like?
As far as kind of moving under the Downtown Brookings organization.
Just, you had mentioned trying to get vendor feedback when you're doing things like writing grants or establishing different protocols, and I'm just curious how formal of participation or feedback you were looking.
Yeah. So I think so like when we were looking at I'll talk about a couple different ways on involving the vendors and kind of the decisions that happen for the market. So when we were looking at moving the organization under the Downtown Brookings, we put out an email, anyone who had been a vendor the year prior, like, hey, this is something that we're looking at. Please come to this meeting and bring all of your questions, kind of hear the proposal and let us know what you think. And then taking that information and actually like listening to it and working through it, not just like doing it as like, we're hosting this meeting, but it's more of just a thing to check off the list, like actually paying attention to what they want. In the process of becoming a nonprofit, establishing what your vision and what your mission is something that has to be group work. That's something that not just one person can own the process of. And I think doing things like vendor surveys are very helpful and as well as customer surveys. You might think that you know your market, but you don't know it as well as the collective of all the vendors and customers that are there. And so asking them, like, how would you describe your market? Why do you come here? That gives you some really great, I think, adjectives and reason by why your market exists. When you actually become a nonprofit, you have to, your board of directors is on all of that paperwork. So they are legally responsible for that organization. And so you have to make sure that you have vendors who are willing to be responsible legally for your organization. And so making sure that they are involved in that process of establishing that, and that they fully understand what that means to be on the board of that nonprofit organization. And I think there's a lot of ways for vendors to input on what the market looks like without taking on the responsibility on being on a board. And that's why I like doing those kind of all vendor meetings where it's like, hey, what kind of events do you think we need? Did you like having music here? How do you think the layouts can change? Stuff like that. Really just making it an open book where people feel safe to kind of share their ideas and their vision for the market, because that gives you just lots of good information on how to keep growing and keep doing what you're doing. Does that kind of answer what you're
Yeah.
thinking?
Yeah,
Okay.
I was just curious like how formal, but that does.
Yeah.
We have one question in the chat asking if they could see an example of the weekly email that you send out
Yeah.
to vendors.
I'll pull one up and then so when I was first on the board for the farmers market, it was kind of like a first come, first serve um layout where any vendor who is like consistently there like has their spot that they show up to every single week, but any new vendor doesn't know where any of those spots are or anything, and so they might set up in an area that then ends up angering one of the recurring vendors, and it was complicated. And so during COVID, the market coordinator started implementing a layout system, and that has kind of stuck. So it does take more work to every single week make a layout, but it also really helps us figure out how many people are going to be there and making sure that you don't have two beef vendors next to each other, that all three people selling candles are lined up next to each other. Um, so let me pull it up here. Hmm. All right, I'm gonna share my screen again. Okay, so here is what one of those weekly emails look like. So I BCC all of the vendors who are planning to attend that weekend on it. So if someone replies, it doesn't reply to every single vendor. I mean, it's a lot of people. Um, so I say hi. I give any updates on special activities that are happening at the market that day, because I know the further they read, the less they're going to read. So I put the most important kind of update for the weekend on the top. This stuff is just literally copy pasted week to week as a reminder. Any vendor who's there consistently knows this stuff, but this is mostly for those vendors who maybe only come a couple times a season, or only there once a season, to help them kind of know how the market functions. I put an update on the weather, and I put a reminder there if it's going to be windy, to bring tent weights. This changes out every single week depending on who the market coordinator is. And so I don't want to get the call at 7 a.m. that someone's running late. And so I make sure that that market coordinator is on there, so they're the one who gets the call, because I will still be asleep. And then this other opportunities is kind of that copy pasted, and then we add our own little things in there for uh, opportunities that are taking place. And then this is what our layout looks like. And so I make this in Canva. It's a website. And so I have kind of our layout. I have marked where the electrical is and who's hooking up to which electrical. We try to have all of the vendors stay in the same quadrant every single one. And so even like Sipka, Gilkerson's, they are always in those spots. They will never move out of those spots. But someone maybe like Norms, who comes once or twice a month, might not always be at spot 42, but we'll always make sure that he is on the right side of the road, on that bottom quadrant. So he might be at 42, he might be at 44, he might be at 39, but we always make sure that they're kind of in the same area so customers can get familiar with that, where they're at consistently. And then I should also send out, show you guys, let me try to find it. We send out, um, I'm going to pull up our yearly kind of email that we send, to remind people to apply. Maybe if I can find it. We send a lot of emails. Any other questions while I'm looking for it? I,
Yeah, I'll interject. So I'm in Tyndall, which
Mhm.
whole different population size.
Yeah.
But we have received this year one of those agriculture marketing AMS farmers market promotion grants. So it'll fund a market manager for 3 years. But
Fantastic.
so in like most of our vendors, our growers, whatever, like they go to multiple markets.
Hmm.
In other words, right. And so and because we're small, you want to coordinate with other markets. But the basic idea behind this AMS thing is this grant, is that the market better connects the consumer and the producer. And I've really enjoyed your presentation and have nothing but compliments about that. But there's a element where the market could become in some instances more of a chamber of commerce community promotion event than a mechanism to improve the vendors, to enhance their sales and encourage them for value added products and that sort of thing. And there's other models. I mean, in South Dakota, pretty much everybody uses the farmers market thing, which is basically an enhanced, selling on the roadside stand. But I mean, they're great. But there's like cooperative models and things like that are more where there's more vendor engagement, in that. But anyway, is there any aspect of your market that recognizes any of those themes?
Yeah. So, I think that we are that makers and growers market only, that is a requirement that you make your food and what you are selling and you are able to speak to it at length with those customers. And that we don't allow any just like general marketing of like the local chiropractor can't just show up and set up a booth and give massages. They've applied, we've always said no. Like we have to make sure that whoever's there is a good fit for the purpose of the market. And if you look into kind of how our market functions, it's underneath the Downtown Brookings organization, but the farmers market has completely its own branding, its own website, its own social media. Like we only mention that it's part of Downtown Brookings um, pretty rarely. We kind of brand it as its own entity, its own everything, because we want it to be known as the farmers market. Like it's very important. If you hear farmers market, you know kind of exactly what to expect. So we never would want to call it, the Brookings, downtown Brookings market. That means something completely different than farmers market. Um, and so it is a farmers market and it will always be a farmers market where its primary goal for the market is those entrepreneurs, those people who are producing food, and that is a priority for that is food producers. And so I think that artisan thing that I had mentioned earlier, so we have a number of artisans who make their own products, and so it's things like tumblers and jewelry and woodworking projects and things like that I think are lovely. But the point of the farmers market is food. And so this year, when we accepted our artisans, we said, yeah, we're excited to have you there. However, we do have limited space because our priority is on food producers. And so every month they fill out a kind of availability for the following month, and then we assign them weekends for when we will have space for them. Because again, that priority is specifically on food. And so does that kind of help bring a little bit more clarity? Yeah. And I can definitely see how an organization like a chamber, economic development, a downtown organization could overstep, overtake, and kind of strangle the whole idea of a market where we kept it very much in the spirit of the original organization of making sure that it is for makers and growers. And so you would have to trust that parent organization to understand kind of what that means and the intention of the market, that it's not just like it's not a craft show. It's not a, vendor, it's not a home show. It's not like one of those sorts of things where people are just kind of handing out koozies. Like that's not the point of the market for us. Might be for other people though. And sorry, I cannot find the email that we send out that kind of invites people to apply, but I will share quickly when we approve an application. This is what we send here. So we give reminders so they know exactly what to expect when they arrive. So what time the market starts, what time the road is closed, that we're open all the time, rain or shine, about the layout process, about when they need to move their vehicle and where they can park, suggestions on how to run their tent, like as far as like keeping it from blowing away, essentially. Dues, reminder about sales tax, and then where they can go if they have questions. And we don't have it on that particular one that I had just sent, but we also have a guide that we made that's just a front and back of a page. It talks about sales tax, and then we also we accept SNAP at our market, and so what that SNAP process looks like, how to use we have these little tokens, so how people can use these tokens, what products they can use it on and stuff like that. And so we include that, and we also physically hand that paper out at a vendor's first market day. And then for actual day of market stuff, every Friday, I take a tub with all the SNAP supplies in it and this binder, and I drop it off in our farmer's market trailer. So on the front of the binder, I have that layout that I had sent out through email. And then inside, I have a timesheet and notes for the market coordinator to leave notes for me, since I'm not necessarily there every Saturday. So I know if something happened, if someone forgot to pay, whatever that is. And then we have this spreadsheet where we have all the different vendors who are approved. If they are that nonprofit vendor that doesn't have to pay, if they've been fully paid for the year. And so the market coordinator will mark if they attended and then if they paid. And then also in the binder, we have a to-do list. So the market coordinators of what they do every day, how to run that SNAP processing machine, a copy of our rules, a copy of the coordinator's job description, copy of our physical application, and then here is, I'll show you quick. That handout. So one side has sales tax information, and then one side as how we do SNAP EBT. So that's stuff that every single week our coordinator has and can hand out as needed.
Yeah, I've got one just sales tax comment, but the Yankton Department of Revenue office contacted me about a year ago when we were getting going, and then when in our conversation when I said, well, we're a nonprofit, and I gave them all the documentation, then she said, well, that's fine, you don't have to pay the sales tax then, because it's the vendors. And then she said, but would you pass out, I'll send you a packet of information forms, and would you just make sure your vendors know that they're supposed to record and file sales tax? And then she actually contacted me at the end of last season and wanted a list of all the vendors who showed up. So I think South Dakota's been very accommodating for the small producer, and they'll cut them a lot of slack, but especially with the budget situation changing in the state, and it's good advice for people to be honest and keep records. And as I understand it, the market, even if you're a nonprofit, you're supposed to keep a record, like you do, of course, of your attendees. And I believe the state revenue department has authority or rights or whatever, to ask for that list. So that's just a little more icing
Yes.
on the revenue cake from Tyndall, South Dakota.
A couple of thoughts on that. So I very much take it as like we need to do our due diligence as the market coordinator to make sure that our vendors are doing things legally and correctly. So we pass out that information about sales tax. And when they apply, if they're selling anything like eggs, canned goods, any hot products, that we ask them for a copy of either their egg handling license, of their, oh, I just made a thumbs up thing, an egg handling license, a copy of their either their testing for their canned goods or that training certificate, their serve safe certificate, that kind of shows us that they have are licensed to be able to do and sell the things that they are selling. So we ask for that before they get approval to be able to sell those items at the market. And even though we're a nonprofit, our nonprofit is not exempt from collecting and submitting sales tax. So when we sell our mugs and bags, we collect and submit sales tax on that. So that's something that's important to keep in mind is we are collecting sales tax from the consumer that is buying that product and submitting that. So. And we have an accountant. That's one of the joys of, I think, being part of that larger organization is that we have an accountant that does all that stuff, for previously whoever the market manager was had to know and submit all that.
Wow. One comment from my perspective on the sales tax thing, I'm putting in the chat right now a link to our website. Actually, next Tuesday, we're hosting a webinar with the Department of Revenue on record keeping and sales tax. It is specific to specialty crop businesses, but I think the information would be applicable to probably any vendor or farmers market. So if yourselves or you want to forward it out to your email this week to your vendors, that's open to anyone who wants to join if you have questions.
Well, what time is that?
It is on June 24th at noon. And I just put the link to register. You do have to register ahead of time to get the link. So just keep that in mind. But hopefully it would be helpful to both the markets as well as any vendors or producers.
One of the other reasons that we track who attended and what they paid throughout the year is previously the market manager would write like a paper receipt every single time someone paid. And now I'm like, I don't know, that's a lot of work. And so what we do is send out a receipt at the end of the year for how much they paid for the entire year. And that seems to work pretty well. So total between the winter and the summer, we now do 38 markets. And if we have roughly 30 people at each one of those, I can't do math that fast, but that's what, 1,000 different paper receipts that we'd be writing in a year. So it's much easier to just send out 100 receipts at the end of the year online through email.
We're over, and I don't mean to keep asking questions, but
no, go for it.
I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about you mentioned planning different events like the family yoga or having activities for kids. Do you plan that at the beginning of the year, kind of at large? Do you have a schedule that you give to the vendors ahead of time, or is in that Friday email, is that the first time they're hearing about that week's events?
Yes. So we previously, because of just availability of electricity, we love having live music, but we just didn't have enough electrical in order to host them. We are borrowing this big power bank thingy from our Chamber of Commerce this year. And so we're able to have live music almost every weekend. And so when I share that out, I just share that the week of which band is going to be there or which performer. So if they want to look them up ahead of time, they can. The family yoga that used to be every Saturday. So that was just kind of an expectation. But yeah, but now it's just once a month. Just because the yoga teacher, again, every Saturday is a lot to ask for someone. And so so that we have those dates ahead of time at the beginning of the year, but we don't really send them out ahead of time because it doesn't really affect, I would say, how the market functions. And there's probably 20 to 30 people that do yoga, but that's like not enough of an increase of people to like make a big difference to the total guest count at the market that weekend. I would say the things that we make sure to really communicate is that we move the farmers market a couple times a year to like physically in the downtown commercial area for our larger festival events. So we have one that's on June 28th called the Brookings Bonanza. And so that's one that we are making sure that we are really communicating that ahead of time so people remember that we are moving that day. There's going to be a brand new layout. You will want to show up a little bit earlier, but that also then the farmers market has the opportunity to, the vendors can either function as the farmers market and be there from 9 to noon just in a different spot, or join the kind of larger festival event that runs from 9 all the way till 4 p.m. And so a lot of our vendors who don't sell those perishable products, who are selling like soaps and jewelry and stuff like that, are interested in attending that bigger festival. But we, I think it's annoying to have to move for the festivals, and I'm fully aware of that, but I think it is such an excellent marketing opportunity for the farmers market. We see at those festivals 8,000 people through the day, and so that's 10 times the amount we normally see at the farmers market. And we keep the farmers market in its own kind of separate side street area, so it's part of the festival, but it's very much still branded as the farmers market, and so it really gets that kind of ingrained in people's head. I think a good example of like why coming downtown is important to do. So we have SNAP, the ability to accept SNAP. We probably process maybe $20 a weekend for one person. Like we really don't use it very much. But when we move the farmers market downtown, we had probably 3, 4, 5 different people who came and redeemed their SNAP for tokens that day. And one of them was like, man, I wish the farmers market was every weekend. And I was like, it is. And so like I because there's just so much more marketing and promotion that goes into the big festival event, a lot more people are kind of just aware of it. Where the farmers market, you know, we're doing consistent marketing throughout the season, but we're never doing this like massive big splash of like a huge marketing campaign to get people there for one weekend. One of the cool things that we're working on this year is Madeline, our intern, is working on a pollinator day at the farmers market. And so kind of making a little passport for a Saturday in August, and working on having like the extension and our sustainability council and some folks from SDSU and local beekeepers come down and do a lot more education on that. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Should be good. But we have a couple other events that are fairly consistent. Like every year, the Brookings Fiberworks Guild comes down and does a knit in at the market on the lawn for the Worldwide Knit in Public Day. Every year they come and do that. And so it's stuff like that where it's like we're not necessarily like coordinating that as we are just like giving people a space to do something fun that also provides benefit to the market. And that was just last weekend, so you missed it. It was pretty cool.
In public day, that is the cutest thing.
Yeah. And so like they sit, there's probably, I don't know, 10, 15 of them that kind of sit in a circle. One of them has a spinning wheel and is like making yarn, and everybody's just knitting, and it's quite nice.
Adorable.
One other thing that the farmers market, how it benefits our organization is that the Downtown Brookings organization also does cleanup, is in charge of kind of cleanup stuff downtown for the neighborhood as a whole. If we have volunteers that want to come help pick up garbage around the neighborhood. Oftentimes groups want to do that on Saturday. And so I would have to go and check them in, talk to them, check them out. But now the farmers market, we have a paid staff member there. We just have them always go and sit at they check in at the farmers market, grab their supplies. And so I don't have to physically come down and kind of check people in. So that's a benefit for me, is that I don't have to be there every Saturday.